Do not tell me that this is finally the moment you've decided to actually care about someone other than yourself.
Don't touch Roach.
What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Here we are on a Friday. I'm trying to bring you some energy, get you through to the end of the day and into the weekend. And for my viewers who work retail and you got to work this weekend or something, well, I'll try to get you through at least. Now, when I woke up this morning, I knew that the reviews would be dropping on The Witcher TV series on Netflix. Now, this show has had one heck of a roller coaster ride in terms of, well, my interest in it whatsoever, as well as the fandom's interest in it, because early on, we saw some very bad editing, some very bad signs where the Nilfgaarden looked like the scrotal soldiers, and we saw some not so encouraging statements from the showrunner of the show, and the level of wokeness, things like that. Look, here's what I can say. As a tangential fan of the Witcher lore, as you know, I'm still working my way through the game, having a blast. As a large fan of Henry Cavill, I can tell you, before we get into this show is worth a watch. Here's what my take is on it before we get to the critics. The first episode drags, the pilot drags, and that's not uncommon. That almost every new show, that first episode just isn't that great. It's super rare to see the first episode just come out of the gates and hit the ground running. The showrunner talked about how the show would, quote unquote, focus on the woman. It does. There are entire episodes without Geralt. So this isn't like the Geralt show. It's actually a show, that's taking the time to build up other characters like Yennefer and things like that. The action scenes I was expecting to be weak just because it's Netflix. It's Netflix, not HBO. I thought they held up. I thought they were above average, or at least they met or exceeded my expectations. The CG was decent. The scenery was excellent. The male characters, I talk about, a lot of times you see a lot of these diversity Hollywood people, and they make the strong female characters at the expense of male ones, as we see in Star Wars, for example. That's not the case in this series. I think there are plenty of really tough, strong male characters in the show. And if you're a fan of one of the things we all remember about Game of Thrones, there is a lot of nudity. I mean, a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean like every single episode, practically for long periods of time.
Oh, look at that.
It got a little over the top. I'm not going to say it hurt the show, but even in Game of Thrones, I remember I was like, oh, we get it. Maybe if there's more variety, like if you see the same person over and over and over again, which you do in The Witcher, kind of, it gets a little played out. I remember Game of Thrones had Daenerys. I was like, okay, we get it, but it's certainly not a negative. But some critics are taking some offense to it. And when I woke up this morning, the score for the Witcher series was actually rotten on Rotten Tomatoes, with very few critic scores in. Now, I don't know how many people would review, The Witcher, for example. If I look at, let me think, like Stranger Things on Netflix, the critic score, 93%, audience score 91%. The number of critics that, generally review these types of shows are a little bit lower, but given the money that The Witcher is putting in and given the press, I think they made one huge mistake, which Netflix. And maybe I'm wrong about this, because if you're not seeing Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker today or this weekend, The Witcher would be a great show for you to binge and watch. Ultimately, I've seen some reviewers mention this, and I would agree with it, that unfortunately, Season 1 is a lot about setting up Season 2, which can be very frustrating. But the ending is good. It's not like a total bait and switch kind of thing. And they've reviewed it for a second season. We knew that was going to happen. You don't bring these kind of people in, this kind of money. You don't spend this kind of money on a show and not give it 2 or 3 seasons, even though Netflix does tend to do that. I don't think that was their intention with The Witcher. I was never surprised to hear there be a Season 2. But nonetheless, there is, and you will feel a bit of a setup there for Season 2. For me, if you're a fan of the video game, you'll like it. You just get to see more Geralt kicking butt. If you're a fan of the books, if you're a hardcore lore person, there will be things that annoy you, certainly, but I still think you can enjoy this show. However, some critics, let's say Entertainment Weekly, who are paid to review things, were flat out disrespectful to the show. Netflix's The Witcher is nakedly terrible. The review. Henry Cavill slashes and smooches through a boring fantasy adaptation. Kristen says, his hair is definitely the brightest thing about The Witcher's first episode. Yeah, this is definitely something the fans are concerned about, which take place in the dreary, muddy, soot-colored town. It's a place where people don't cotton to the witches, at least if the grimy bearded man Geralt encounters in the pub is to believe. Well, that's, yeah, okay, we knew about that. We don't want your kind around here, he grounds. There are several naked women in the first episode alone. Darren, 7. I think I've seen enough. And then Darren goes on to say, or maybe it's a failure of franchise chasing. The Witcher comes from the novels by Andrzej Sapkowski, which also inspired the acclaimed video game series. I haven't played the games, but the plot has certain tropes from the medium exported without imagination to television. There's a constant download of fantasy verbiage, including much talk about Kikamora, and a town I swear is called... Mikkelsen's character has a big line about how Geralt made a choice, which feels like a hat tip to the open world nature of the games. The intention here is a dark pulp fantasy, where this kind of show and character like Appleton's Renfri is a princess and a mutant who hooks up with Geralt the night before they battle to the death. I'm definitely not averse to the wild extremes of the genre. Shout out to the visceral blood terrors of Adult Swim's Primal. But the first episode felt like a cheese gone moldy. The nude bordello really edged the whole vibe in to a fratty direction, and a long running time required a lot of take forever talk about prophecies and destiny. Which did you watch further into the season? What's wrong with that? Now, dialogue in a show, if it's good dialogue, can be interesting. Look at the dialogue, for example, you see in Pulp Fiction, or in the show Justified, where they take 30 words to say what most people could say in 5 words. A while you don't notice it, but it quietly becomes something that you enjoy. And then you see Darren, also Entertainment Weekly. Now, these people are paid to review television shows. Because life's too short for Netflix drama running times, I skipped ahead to the 5th episode, which brings Yennefer and Geralt plotlines together. Episode 5 also features magic Viagra and a masked orgy to set some truly ridiculous retro softcore music. I do think there's some room for mature content in a fantasy romp in our post-Game of Thrones universe, but the external exposition runs alongside a tin ear for dialogue. Again, so essentially, Entertainment Weekly admits that they didn't even watch the show, and then they're whining about nudity. I mean, these are things that aren't interesting to me. And you know why I think you give the show a shot? It's because of Henry Cavill. The guy has stuck up for the fandom, as we've seen before in other articles, where an interview tries to goat him into calling the fandom toxic, and he doesn't take the bait, and he just says they're passionate. And then you saw this article in GQ. Henry Cavill, gaming on my own is much more fun than going out. Henry Cavill would rather be at home right now without the fame, without the attention, sitting at PC in shorts and t-shirt playing Total War Warhammer 2. Yes, Henry Cavill, Superman. And yes, Warhammer, the game of plastic goblins. And he's played it through 6 times already, accounting for 100 hours of gameplay with 6 different races. Cavill is talking to me a few hours ahead of the premiere of Netflix adaptation of Andrzej Sapkowski's The Witcher. He's elaborating on how his love of escapist gaming, something he's possessed since he was old enough to sit at a computer, only has become more enhanced as his anonymity has disappeared. Quote, every time I step out my front door, I'm hyper aware, he says. Even if I'm not looking terrible, you realize that there are people taking sneaky photos of you because of that's what people like do. And then they put them on the internet and you see them on Instagram and you're like, oh my God, he groans. At home, I get to sit playing video games, playing ridiculous amounts of hours and escape there because going outside has the opposite effect. The Hollywood star's perfect get for Netflix's original show, a biologically flawless, world-famous presence. He's a kind you wouldn't necessarily expect to be headlining an adaptation of niche Polish high fantasy literature that spawned hugely successful video game franchise. But he's who Netflix needed to join a less recognizable supporting cast. In fact, it was a role the actor chased from the moment he found out about it. What's there not to love about Henry Cavill? And he also talks a lot about, it's difficult to date because of the way that people are these days. If we look at the very early, super duper early Rotten Tomatoes reviews of the show, positive. When I woke up this morning, I saw it had a negative Rotten Tomatoes score, something like 47%. But then I scrolled down and it was only through 15 reviewers. Right now, it's at 67%. Probably, definitely trending up if we look at, the reviews in order. The last 4 have all been positive. Kayla Cobb saying, one heck of a great time. Kate Sanchez, The Witcher is a fantasy epic. It's beautiful, it's action-packed, and it's also deeply emotional. A must-watch for fans of the genre, but more importantly, it works for fans of the games, of the books, and those just coming to the story. Next review down, The Witcher has what it takes to reach fans of a fantasy genre. Next one, The Witcher brings the world's rich characters, sharp wit, and stylish action to life. Truly delightful way. There are some negatives, right? The Witcher, Andrew Bundy says, The Witcher is simply redundant and repetitive discount fantasy with a budget that creates the illusion of quality. So, looks great, not a good show, in his opinion. Daniel from a Variety magazine, this is a show with moments of drama and gruesome violence cut through with glancing humor that too often feels tossed off and out of place. The world the show has created. Negative. From Entertainment, like all fantasy, a long journey has to be undertaken before it can reach its destiny. The Witcher has a long way to go. None of these are like truly, truly bad. If you're utterly devoted to the world of The Witcher, you'll certainly enjoy the film familiar aesthetic and characters, but beyond that, the series is hard to recommend. And that's from GameSpot. That's interesting. I don't think the creators of The Witcher hope to capture anybody outside of general Witcher fandom. If they do, it's going to be small numbers. But right now, the fans have given it an 88% in early reviews, only 338 showing on Rotten Tomatoes. But I don't expect that to drop too much based on what I've seen. It's a little different than the Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, which I'll talk about later today, where I suspect that will continue to drop. In fact, it just went up again as I was sitting here to 89%. By the time the editors get this, it might be at a 90%. 372 reviews. So I'm going to say if you give a Witcher TV series a try, you're going to have to commit to at least 3 or 4 episodes. And if you do, I think that it's a better use of your time than seeing The Rise of Skywalker or Cats this Christmas season. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.